Let's see, preparing to be live streamed.
Maui, there's a lot of mosquitoes.
Done. All right. Let's see here. All right.
Yeah,
Perfect.
we're live on YouTube. Yay.
Okay, let me just make sure that people are going to come on here. And I want to make sure there's no feedback from the speakers. Okay, if anybody is here, if there's actual people watching, which it shows they're starting, can somebody just comment and say that they hear us?
Hi, everyone.
Let me see, wait, I'll say, can you hear us? Okay. Hey, Nicholas. Yeah, if somebody could just say if they can hear us, that's the issue that we're trying to square away here. And if that's the case, we're good to go. Do you hear us? All right, perfect. Somebody said it loud and clear. Thank you, Nicholas. Much appreciated. All right, so this is awesome. And I have with me Halimah. Okay, and the reason we've come together and that we're going to do this is because she is doing something that not enough people are doing, much less talking about and getting into, and that is addressing the needs of the children, the multidimensional aspects of all of us. You know, we were all children at one point. There is a massive amount of children on the planet that are getting subjected to crazy indoctrination, crazy amounts of stuff. Meanwhile, we know deep down, and many of the people on this channel, we are not the products of a consumeristic society. We've unconsciously become that, but we are not products. We are living, breathing, flesh and blood, multidimensional, organic intelligence derived beings that, you know, we don't just, who we are doesn't stop and start with our skin. Our energy field that's animating our heart and causing us to exist is all over. It goes into infinity. So, but nobody's ever really taught us this in Western civilizations. And now we've come to a point when no matter what anybody believes about the current narratives and everything that's happening, there's something way greater than all of that happening. And that is essentially that we as a species have been living out of coherence with nature, with natural law, with universal law. And we, even though that there's big bad wolves orchestrating all this stuff from up above, we have unconsciously consented to supporting their efforts, meaning we have taken our attention, this valuable, priceless gift that we all have, that most don't know the power of, and we have used it to empower somebody else's vision. And now we're seeing that that vision doesn't really have our best interests at heart, you could say. So,
man.
But even that, let's like, me being somebody who, it's a miracle I'm alive. It's a miracle any of us are alive, but that's the whole point. And part of becoming the embodiment of the miracle that each and every one of us actually is, means that we don't get caught up or hung up in thinking we know anything. Like even me, I always check myself. I become aware of things that are happening around, and because of my human conditioning, the conditioned parts of my ego that think certain things mean something, I'll consider it, albeit, and then I'll even let go of that because I know what is truly happening is beyond human comprehension according to conditioning. So that's my intro. And what she's doing, I'm going to be careful about the words here, and I'm going to let you say what you do because I don't want to, you know, and we're being careful about this here. But she is working with children in a way that the world needs to hear about. So thank you for coming on here.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Where you just left off, Seth, was really incredible, actually. And just for everyone that is meeting me for the first time, my name's Halimah, and I run a fifth dimensional preschool program here in Hawaii. And so I'm here in Hawaii, and it's been pretty magical. We've just created a really small, very sweet community of like-minded individuals, and yeah, it's incredible to see what's happening with what we're doing with the children. And what you said, Seth, about the conditioning and how we really don't know, that's really something that we've been exploring for many years now. Is that, a lot of times when a child is having an emotional response, and as parents, we want to go there and we want to process with them, especially when they're having the emotional response. And we actually don't know what is happening when they are releasing, when they're crying, when they're screaming. All we know is that they're releasing cellular density. And that can be from a lifetime ago. We have no idea. Just what is happening in the now moment is giving them the opportunity to release what is now ready to be released. And so that really is the foundation of what we're doing here at this program. And it's been really incredible because it goes beyond the conditioning then. The conditioning is actually becoming an opportunity rather than being, the condition.
Right.
And it's really also about with the parents, because a lot of parents, and God bless them, have so much love for their children. They're like, when their baby is crying, they're like, what's going on? Like, what can I do? They want their child to stop. And that's really a conditioning that we have been really programmed to do. Is when someone is crying, we want them to stop, or we want it to shift. Everyone is in the, like, let's be in the love and the joy. And that's actually where we are, is in that coherence that you're talking about, even when the waves come. So that's really for us what we're focused on with the program. And then it becomes fun, right? Then we get to play and we get to explore all of these incredible capacities that we have and that the children have, because them coming in right now, I mean, I'm seeing things that I've never seen before with children. It's really amazing. Yeah.
All right. Let's get into that. But I want to go back a little bit, because you said something really important that I think a lot of us have been denied. It sounds like what you guys are doing is you're allowing children to have their emotional reaction. I know a lot of children have been, when they have an emotional reaction, and whether it's a loving parent or whether it's some non-loving parent or some kind of authoritarian guardian or something, they will either not know what to do, or they won't want the child to have their emotional reaction because it's intense, right? And so that ends up probably causing some kind of suppression or oppression of the child's natural, whether it's a karmic implication, purgative thing, or whether it's just they're having a moment and they need to get their emotions out. That usually gets kind of hushed and silenced, even with parents that love their children.
Yeah. And it becomes the conditioning. So every time that Jack, is crying, and if the mother is then attending to it as if this is something that needs to be redirected or fixed or stopped, or there can be, or are you feeling better now, right? When someone is crying, then they stop crying. The language is, are you feeling better now? As if that feeling that Jack was having was not a good feeling, right? Or a good feeling. And so when you do that a certain amount of times, depending on the child, that's where the programming comes into. And so every time that feeling then arises, Jack then realizes, because that's the programming that Jack's now getting, is oh shit, like I'm crying, there's something wrong. And then that's where lack happens.
Wow.
Yeah. And
So
then we grow
simple,
up.
but so obvious, right? And it's just, if we are not conscious enough as parents, as guardians, even if we're not parents, even if we just are interacting with a community of children because we're teachers or we have friends that have kids, what you're talking about in its simplicity is so powerful, because it's almost like an opportunity that has been denied to most of us,
Absolutely.
that now, because it's being provided, opens up a whole new realm of possibility. So let me ask you this. So say, since we're using Jack as an example, and Jack is just a fictitious name for everybody, it's not a specific child, but so say Jack is having a moment, right? And he's crying, he's flipping out, and he's just going through it. Kind of walk me through like what you guys do with that more directly so that people can understand better.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it depends on the situation, right?
Mhm.
It depends on the situation, it depends on the child, and it also depends on myself. So what's happening is there's a lot of things at play. And when I say it depends on myself, right, there needs to be a deep listening that's happening. There needs to be, one of my girlfriends, I really love this term, she calls it fifth dimensional listening, right?
Mm.
There's this deep listening where, you know, where do I come in? Where do I begin to speak when this child is having this emotional release, right? And usually what I found with the fifth dimensional listening is that it's really my body is guiding me and telling me when to step in, when I can ask him, wow, that was good. That was a good cry. And usually Jack or the child is telling me through his breath. It's always going back to the breath, right? It's always returning to the breath. And so, as an example, and this is just, this is actually a true story. Um, I had a child who was so empathic. I mean, could feel everything to the point at which, and this is really interesting and it's important for parents to know this, is that when you have an empathic child, they can feel every single feeling, so much so that perhaps they can feel anger and it can frighten them. And so when a child is feeling anger, like they can get scared. And then when they feel their own anger, they don't want to tell the world. There's children that say, I'm not angry. And they're kicking and they're screaming and they're saying, I'm not angry, because they don't want, they're trying to have it be like, I don't want you to feel this anger, right? They're so innocent, they're so pure. And so I had a child who was really angry. He wanted the book. He couldn't have the book, like another child was using it, and he was screaming, I'm not angry, I'm not angry. And he started to push up against another child. And so I said, sweetheart, I'm going to help your body. And I just picked him up and I brought him to the other space, and he started kicking me.
Mm.
And in my trainings that I've done, conventional trainings, whenever a child kicks you, you're supposed to like stop,
Yeah.
But the thing that we've forgotten is that for a 3 and a 4-year-old, kicking is actually quite natural for a 3 and a 4-year-old.
Mm.
They don't know how to control their body yet. And so we're here, being an authoritarian saying, stop, like that's not okay, kicking isn't okay. And then it turns into this ego thing, right?
Mm.
And so what ended up happening, and it was really interesting, was he started kicking me, and I just heard this voice that said, no, let him kick you.
Mm.
And so I just stood there and I just started to pray to him, to pray with him, pray with his angel, and he was kicking me. And within like 10 seconds, Seth, he just fell to the ground and he started crying,
Oh.
And so I picked him up and I put him on my lap, and I didn't say anything. I wasn't talking to him about how kicking isn't okay and how I know he's upset. Like, I just let him have his emotional moment, right? We just have to allow the children and allow ourselves to have these emotional moments. That's actually what the work is, right? That's the work. And so after a couple of minutes, then he just took a breath and he was like, and I was like, wow, that was a great breath. That was
Mm.
such a good breath. And then I asked him, I said, would you like to be outside? Would you like to step outside? And he nodded and he went outside. And that was it. And then, of course, afterwards, we followed up with it, and how I followed up with it was after some time, after a couple of hours, I said, sweetheart, that was so wonderful. You breathed so well through that. And also, I know that you're just a child. And I know that you're just learning how to control your body. And that's okay. I know you're doing a really good job learning how to not kick. So it becomes like this learning opportunity. It doesn't become kicking isn't okay. This hurts me. This is unacceptable, because that's where lack comes into. Lack comes in from early childhood. How people are responding to us in early childhood is how we are how lack comes in, right?
How we develop.
So yeah, so this is, and it's always different with every child, right? There's some children where you really need healthy boundaries, but you can do that also in a really compassionate way, and or creative way. I had this little girl, and she was just such a like a firecracker, and I love her. She's amazing. They just called me yesterday, and fierce little girl, and she was working with some clay, and she was working with it for a while. She walked away from the clay to move on to another activity, and she was doing working with a puzzle, and all of a sudden this other child came in and just started working with the clay. Of course, she's done working with the clay. But when she saw this other child working with the clay, she just went for it. And I could just see she was so angry. And I just went to her and I started doing light language with her. I started speaking light language. I started saying, and I'm signaling to, how she's working with the puzzle. And after it was done and I was speaking this language that was just channeling through to me, she looked at me and she went, because when anger is present, it's not the time to meet with resistance. It's not the time to meet with ego. It's the time to meet with either with humor or light language, or taking space.
Openness.
I can just it's interesting, every single group I have, and it's really getting sweet with this question, is back in the day, I've been doing this for about like almost 20 years. And when I first started, I would ask the group of children, is happiness okay? And they'd go, yeah. And then I go, is it okay to feel sad? And they go, yeah. And then I'd say, is it okay to feel angry? And almost half of them, if not all of them, would say no. And that's really where all of this came from, and I was inspired to really look at this and say, okay, something's going on here. Why are they saying that these feelings are okay, but those feelings aren't okay? Yeah.
Oh my God, how beautiful. All right, so what are the age groups? I know that I'm going off. There's a million questions I have here.
I know, I see you. You're like,
yeah. All right, so practically, what are the age groups that you're working with?
Yeah, so right now, it's not really a school because of our times. It's just a program, and where it's between the ages of 3. I used to take them actually smaller, but now it's between the ages of 3 to 6. Yeah.
So you're really making an impact in that early childhood phase where they're starting to become conscious of the ways that most of us are kind of limited in, and
Right.
you're helping to prevent the inhibitions and fear and condition, all the things that prevent us from tapping into the unlimited aspect of what we truly are.
And it's how we respond, I mean, even in the world, when the world is turned upside down and people are wearing masks and all of this stuff is happening and it seems to be super polarized, we can respond to our children in a way that is not polarized. Even in the world where it's going crazy, as long as we are holding that for them and we're responding in a way that is with love and knowing that they are safe,
Yeah.
and giving them the opportunity, to not wear a mask, to not be in entrainment with that other vibration of fear.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter then, they can still really find and be in their wholeness as long as we're responding and meeting them with that wholeness.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, so the other thing that I'm noticing that you're presenting is that your approach really is one where it's therapeutic to you to be able to facilitate this, because you're essentially, what you're doing is you're using they call it the sixth sense, intuition, but it's actually the first sense if we were really in tune with what we are. And that is what
I love
you're
that.
essentially using to create this greater openness of communication with these beautiful little beings. And that is, all right, I'll give my example. When I was a child, okay, I had the perfect early childhood. It couldn't have been any better. And I just naturally was conscious. Okay, and just so for people to understand too, like, from my perspective and whatever, everybody has their own perspective. There's as many perspectives as there are people living on the planet. So to me, like, I try to not use like new age buzzwords and things like that to talk about these processes, only because people can get hung up on what they think that means, right? And when we come really down to the basics, even this language we're speaking right now was taught to us. And so it's really about, but that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. It's more of like, okay, it's a tool, it's a resource to be able to communicate in a way that's more universal currently for our species. So I had the perfect childhood in that these multi-dimensional aspects, right? What you might call, what you're referring to as like a fifth dimension. To me, there is an infinite amount of dimensions, you could say, but that when we, as these individuals, become conscious of how all these internal systems of our body cohere and work together, then suddenly our consciousness isn't just limited to our five senses, right? Like we were saying, intuition is the sixth sense, but it's actually the first sense, really. The five senses, touch, taste, smell, hearing, feeling, like those are the ones that we are primarily used to using in this world. And because we don't function in a intuitive, heart-centric type of way, all of those senses end up becoming mostly focused only on a very narrow perspective of what we have available to us. And what ends up happening over time is that people become less and less connected consciously to their bodies. They end up becoming right stuck here for the most part, and their entire worldview becomes about the self, who they think they are,
right,
in relation to what all these external things mean.
right.
And because we didn't have the opportunity to be in the presence of a caretaker like you, who's letting us go through things and is there. And essentially, if my parents would have encouraged me as a child to just keep doing what I was doing, because as a child, I was like, nobody taught me, and it wasn't any like thing. I just knew that if I was breathing
Mm.
calm and just observing, naturally, all of a sudden, I started to become conscious of this invisible, well, it was invisible at first, but the invisible field of energy that's causing the heart to beat. It's causing all these systems of the body to work together. And suddenly it wasn't invisible anymore. It started
Yeah,
to become visible.
yeah.
And I would realize that the more I would focus on it, the brighter it would get, the more alive it would become, to the degree that even the world around me would start to fade away, because this is a more primary expression of our human existence than not being aware of it and instead just identifying with everything external as who we think we are.
Mm-hmm.
So a big part of what you're doing is, like, by facilitating in the way that you are, you're giving yourself permission to heal in a way that maybe wasn't available to you as a child. I mean,
Totally. I mean, this is something that I share with the parents all the time, is that being a parent and also being a teacher, right? This is an initiation. This
Mm,
is our initiation, and it's the greatest initiation. And how we're responding to our children is how we're responding to our innocence. Absolutely. And so how are we choosing to show up for our children? They're giving us this opportunity to really come back to ourselves, come back to that coherence that you're talking about. So yeah, absolutely, 100%. And when I'm sharing this with the kids, it's so beautiful, because when you're talking about just being back with that breath and really tapping in to all of the energy and tapping into this world, and the light gets bigger and bigger and bigger. We actually share, when I started with working with the children, it was like 2.5 years old. And we
mm,
would say, your breath is your best friend.
mm,
And I still share that with children now at 3. Your breath is your best friend. And so when they really begin to know that, then we can really get into games also. We can do qigong, but we're not calling it qigong.
right.
We're going, we're having a light body and a ball of light.
Mm,
And it's so neat to watch the children, and they have this ball of light, and then they actually, during circle time, they'll say, oh, I feel it, I
oh,
really feel it.
yes.
And it's so incredible. It's so incredible. Yeah. And yeah, it's definitely a reciprocal relationship. With what's going on with them is then what's going on with us. And parents, they can get overwhelmed, and that's totally okay. It's totally okay to be overwhelmed. It's totally okay to just be like, oh my gosh, my child's a rascal and I need to get away. And you know instead of feeling this guilt, it's okay to have these
Mm,
feelings. And a parent asked me once, they're like, Halimah, what do you feel about timeouts? And I said, I'm totally okay with timeouts. And they were shocked. And I said, yeah. I said, as long as you know you're the one that needs timeout.
oh man, that's great. And it's so true. My gosh. So, okay, what essentially we're talking about here is a lot of different things, but to kind of refine it and distill it for the viewers and listeners that are present now and that will watch this later. And by the way, we're going to do some Q&As. So everybody who's here now, think of some stuff if you want to ask questions, but we're going to try to break this down in more practical terms, or at least I'm gonna, and then I'm going to let you take it from there.
That's good.
But what happens when we are not allowed to have our emotional release or our emotional expression is something called, okay, so our ability to have an emotional expression, whether it's, what we might call anger, a fear derived emotion, or a heart centric higher vibration, no matter what it is, if we get stuck in these fear-based emotions, and I guess maybe that's not the right way to say it, because anger and whatever whatever those limited emotions are,
The
essentially.
unconscious, like looping.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what happens, so moving beyond that, they call it the refractory period. So when somebody has an emotional response to something that others might deem as negative, you know, it's like no one wants to deal with it. And so usually what happens is that person will stay stuck in it. It'll affect them negatively, and they try to suppress it or repress it or push it down. And it never really resolves itself. And this is called being stuck, never emerging from the refractory period. Whereas the refractory period, to emerge from it, is have the emotional upset, let it happen, let it go through its full motion. And then the ability for an individual to move beyond that is what helps somebody not only develop resiliency and the ability to bounce back from whatever the initial trauma or impact or emotion is, but it allows said limited emotion to be able to take on new dimensions of emotional possibility.
Absolutely.
Now, and I'll add to this, I was talking with my friend Anne the other night, one of my friends up here in Maine, and she's a leader for a local group and doing a bunch of stuff up here. And she said this great thing. She's like, look, I know people might think this is funny, but I'm going to say it anyway. Wonder Woman is, even though it's a Marvel film or whatever, she's saying she goes, Wonder Woman is one of my favorite examples because her superpower is love. And when you think about this, what we're talking about is like having the right and giving children the right to go through whatever range of emotional intensity and expression they're going to have, while we hold space from them, being conscious of our ability, our response ability to hold space for them to go through that. It increases, because this is what you're talking about, is essentially most people don't want to even touch this stuff. That's why when a kid freaks out or goes through something, a lot of people don't want to deal with it. And so that turns into this like, okay, they shut it off. But what you're talking about doing is having unconditional love for this process, no matter how painful or obnoxious or annoying or whatever it can be, by you breathing, holding that space, knowing that you're committed to this selfless service that essentially is going to empower these young beings to grow into a greater expression of what they have the potential to be. This is the kind of work that essentially nobody taught us to do in this world. And it is increasing, and I'll finish it, but it's increasing the capacity to love. And this is what I always tell people, because, and those who don't really know much about me or whatever, I had severe trauma, severe impact, addiction, prison. I mean, just went on and on and on. So many things happened that were so extreme that when they would happen, I'd be like, am I ever going to heal? Am I ever going to be able to move beyond this? And there were times when I was stuck in these low to high grade states of upset for months, sometimes depression, sadness, grief, just really, really hardcore things that just weren't letting up. And I realized that if I didn't do something, then I would stay stuck in this for a long time. And the studies show that most people live in a low to mid to sometimes high grade state of emotional upset for most of their lives. And this has become normal in our institutionalized, indoctrinated, conditioned society. So we're talking about breaking these cycles by not breaking them, by just bringing a greater expression of emotional potential to them. And here's where I was going with all this. when we face whatever it is that we feel is preventing us from feeling gratitude, from feeling love, from feeling these greater expressions of the states that we're stuck in, this is contingent upon our ability to begin to practice self-love for no reason at all other than we are choosing to. And the world teaches us something very different. They say love, they teach us that love is like, oh, it's this fairy tale thing, and love comes from somebody else bringing it to you, or you can be happy when you get a car or a house or this or that. We're taught that all of these external things bring us joy and happiness, with love being kind of like
Totally.
the gem on the top of the crown, right?
Right.
But
Absolutely.
here,
Yeah.
and I'll say this and then I'm going to let you go, but love, I know
No, it's
I
so, it's like,
yeah.
I'm totally.
And here's, so love, okay, we never really, it becomes this like elusive thing that most everybody wants, but we have these limited ideas of what we think it is, to the degree of like, oh, we want to be in love, we want more love, and we think that somebody or something is going to initiate that feeling of love within us. But what nobody ever taught us is that, and that other way is like winning the lottery. Like most people, sure, some people find love from somebody or something, but it's kind of like winning the lottery. Most don't. The real truth, you could say, behind this is that love is a skill that we cultivate and develop by our willingness to become conscious of what it is, the energy that's causing our heart to beat, when we, as these conditioned, indoctrinated egos that we get stuck and hung up and looped in, when we choose to take the limited aspect of who we think and feel we are and start to entrain it with the unlimited innate intelligence of the energy that's causing the heart to beat, eventually the limited mind realizes that it can't comprehend how miraculous this actually is, and it just stops. It like literally it just stops. And when that happens, a flood of emotional feelings that are like superpowers begin to come online. And I'm not talking about the World Wide Web here. We're talking about the universal web of life that is the organic intelligence, not the artificial intelligence that most people are giving most of their attention to most of the time. But that's another topic we'll get into later. So I'll just say this really quick, and then I'm going to let you run with it. What Halimah is talking about here, and the practice she is doing and holding space for these kids, and by having the mind and heart set herself to facilitate this kind of presence or whatever, for being present with the children, this is allowing both her and the children to begin to experience the other side of these emotions, because fear and anger and these limited emotions are actually containers that, if we allow them to be what they are in their full capacity, are teaching us how to feel and love at a greater capacity than we're even capable of imagining. And our entire internal physiology and anatomy is wired to be able to feel what it's like to know your place amongst infinity.
Mm-hmm.
Could there be anything more exciting to do, like at these times,
Yeah. There's so much to share about this and what you're speaking on. And when you were talking, I was like,
Yeah.
there's just so much. For me, what comes up, and it's so fascinating because we're looking at early childhood, right?
Yeah.
And early childhood, actually, the world is a reflection for that child. The world is them at that time. They don't have that that discernment yet, that, I am in my energy field, and then this is the world, right? They're not able to discern yet.
Mm.
And so, especially with parents, the way that they're responding is actually a reflection of what's going on internally for that child.
Mm.
And what came up for me when you were talking about this was, for little children who are 3, 4, and 5, even 6 and 7, at this time, they do have those rose colored glasses on.
Mm.
They are looking and they're going, oh, this world, oh my gosh. And they're using this world as really a map for looking at what love is, right?
Mm.
And then it's interesting, there's a shift that happens. Um, and I love Rudolf Steiner. I think that also if Rudolf Steiner was around today, I think he would actually have a very different curriculum because of what's happening now, right?
Yeah.
And but something he shares that I love is this 9-year change where gravity takes a hold of this human, and it's at this time that they start to realize this is me and this is the world. And it's a huge moment in a person's life. It's called this 9-year change.
Mm.
And it's also looking at when you're talking about love, if you have that deprogramming, that conditioning, that up until a certain age, then you start to, when gravity takes a hold of you, yeah, love, you're going to be looking for it outside yourself, right? That's what's going to happen. So it's really important that during these early years, we're really responding to these children in a way that's giving them, empowering them, that they have it within themselves. And it really is all about how we're responding. And there's that entrainment that's happening.
Mm.
So, if I'm angry, it's important to show that I'm angry. And also the child knows that they're still safe when I'm angry.
Mm.
There's no blame. I'm angry. I'm having a moment, and I'm not blaming you. I'm angry. I can be frustrated. When I was in several preschools, I would just see these teachers and they'd go, "I'm not angry." And they would just have all of this rage in them, and they would just be telling these children, "I'm not angry." And it was just such mixed messages. And so it's really important to, yeah, build that foundation of them understanding that there is that place inside of them where they will cultivate that love for themselves.
Mm.
And it really comes back to how we're responding to them.
Mm.
Absolutely, 100%. And so, with this world that's acting a little bit crazy right now, right? It's important to hold that space because the world is a reflection of the children,
Mm.
and a lot of times parents, like I had a call with a former parent that called me up and they were like, I don't know what to do. They're like, Halimah, we're living here in Oregon, and right now our son is going to this Waldorf charter school, but it's still a public school system. It's still in the public school system, and right now they're doing these stronger mandates and they're wearing these masks, and we don't know what's coming down the pipeline and all of this stuff, right? We don't know if they're going to enforce
Yeah.
everything, right?
Yeah. Right.
And so they said, but we know that socialization for a 7-year-old is so important,
Mm.
right? So what do we do? Do we continue to keep him in this school, or what should we do?
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I was listening and there was this contraction when they were talking about, what do we do? We don't, like, I could hear that they didn't want to send their child there, but socialization is important. And so what I just invited them to explore was, yeah, there's an entrainment that's happening. And so when you're putting your child, because they were saying, yeah, but our children are resilient. Our children are resilient.
Mm.
And that kind of goes back to thinking that our children already understand that love that they have within themselves, and they don't
Mm,
at that age. They don't.
right.
They're looking at this world, and they're saying this world is a reflection of me. And even if it's looking crazy for us, we're seeing the mask, we're hearing all these things, it can actually become kind of like fun for the children, as long as they know that they are safe, they are loved, and they have choice. You're right. As parents, we need to do that.
Mm,
So I invited them to explore it, and I was like, socialization is important, yeah, and but is your child really resilient? Are they really
oh,
resilient?
mm,
Let's look at that. What does that mean? Are you putting them in a place of apathy where they're going to be wearing a mask, where entrainment is going to happen, where they're going to have shallow breathing? That shallow breathing is completely a reflection of feelings like lack and fear and anxiety, right? When those
being a
feelings
product
come,
of society.
totally,
The
totally.
shallowness of that, right? Like, yeah.
So yeah, socialization is important. But how are they going? Are they going to be socializing, or are you putting them in a place where it's traumatizing for them?
Mm,
And that's really where I think the rubber meets the road. And this is where parents really need to start to look at other choices that they have, and how beautiful, right? I know it can be scary. I really do. I made a huge leap of faith where I was living in the Bay Area. We had like a massive preschool, and all of this stuff started happening. And I checked in with myself, and it was like, all right, it's time. Like, it's time to leave the Bay Area. It's time to move. And that was my trajectory, right? It's time
mm,
to move to Hawaii. And it was like, let me check in with my body, right? And it's a huge leap. But when you're making these decisions from a place of love and for the well-being for your child, that's where it's at. That's where the
mm,
love is. That's actually, you're then coming into yourself. You're tapping into that love, that wholeness, and you're not actually looking for the world to give you the answers, right? So yeah, and it's hard. Like, I get it. It takes a lot of courage, so much courage to like pull your kids out of the school and set up these pods. And yeah,
well, meanwhile, all these institutions are crumbling anyway. So it's like, those who are not caught up in their fear-based response are realizing, wow, we got to create new systems. And that's beautiful. That's a great thing. Like, these old institutionalized systems that are based upon everything that we know they're based upon, why would we want to even continue to think that we're going to save those anyway?
right.
Create new ones, create better ones. And
Right.
another thing I want to mention too, that I love what you're talking about, because a lot of people I'm not saying this community specifically, but in the spiritual community or whatever, they have this idea that a lot of people promote this, love and light and spiritual bypassing kind of thing or whatever. And to me, I don't know. I don't really pay a lot of attention to any of that stuff, because I'm much more interested in being conscious of the selfless aspects of my own being and integrating them into myself, and then interacting with others from that place, because I've just witnessed so many times the beauty and miracle and power of that level of personal intimacy, then, brought out into the world where we're creating new intimacy with others,
Mhm.
deep friendships, deep connections with total strangers.
Yeah.
Because before any of this happened, with everything that's happening now, we grew up in a world that doesn't encourage closeness. It's more like encouraging competition to fit in the corporate whatever the word is, workplace, all that. And so a lot of the issues that would happen is people feel like, oh, all this like good attitude and love and light and all that, it's bypassing the real work. And I love what you're doing, because you're hitting that full on, with children right at the beginning, where it's like, no, we're not bypassing anything. We are encouraging full emotional divulgence or response or reaction, and just letting it happen and sustaining that place. And that's what creates that resiliency. And when a kid goes from freaking out and being upset, then to have an adult who's just lovingly there to say, okay, see how you came out of that? You caught your breath, you did it, and they feel better suddenly. That's making a big impact.
So empowering, so empowering. And it's interesting because, you know, like you're saying, spiritual bypassing, the word that I was looking at for this in just being a teacher and working with children is that, you know, spiritual bypassing is emotional bypassing.
Yes.
That's it.
That's
That's exactly what it is. It's emotional bypassing. And we have this idea that, you know, there's a lot of these buzzwords in the spiritual community right now, which is fifth dimensional, right? All of this stuff. And it's great. It's wonderful to use language and to allow it to grow and flourish. And like, let's really look at fifth dimensional, because there's people where they're saying like, oh, I'm feeling like crap. I'm feeling like, oh my God, I'm feeling like crap. And I lost it. You lost what? They think like, I'm not in the fifth dimensional realm anymore because you're feeling like crap. No, actually you are. Yeah. And this is giving you an opportunity to go deeper, to become more intimate with yourself. It's actually an opportunity for you to raise your frequency. So when you go to those places, like, that's actually giving you the opportunity to expand your light. And that's the same. That's what's happening with children. And I find it really interesting that children, and this is something, you know, I just explore, like I don't have like an answer for, but I find it so fascinating that, you know, spirit or sort, but ourselves, we have chosen to come in as children and to have these tantrums.
Yeah.
Right? To have these large, emotional, explosive things happen, right? We chose to have this at a very young age. It's so interesting that happens at this young age. And really, it's important to have that safe container for that, so that when they come up later on in life, you can really, it becomes medicine. You know, those moments become medicine. Yeah.
So how beautiful is this? My God. All right, let's look and see if anybody has any questions. Let's see, there's 26 people watching now. Tons more will see this later. Do you accept your crown? And if so, talk, okay. All right, if anybody has any questions, now is the time to ask. This is live. And we want to encourage, and I apologize, for everybody who sees me, I'm not sitting in a sauna. I'm upstairs in my house right now and it's 90 degrees outside and it's humid. And so I'm just like, yeah, if you see me sweating, that's why. Okay. So so where can people find you? And we're gonna write some stuff up below this video.
Yeah.
And how can they learn more about potentially doing what you're doing in their corner of the world?
Yeah, just get to me through Instagram.
Okay.
You can message me on Instagram. I'm at halima.harden, and we'll send the link down below. So I'm on Instagram. That for right now is my place where you can reach me at.
Okay, perfect. Somebody said, I've been working in child care for 20 years and I've been putting this out there for a long time.
Beautiful.
That's great. Yeah, this is perfect.
That's beautiful. And there's so many of us now, you know, I'm seeing so many teachers that are really coming together, and that's what's happening. We're finding, just like we're finding plots of land to build community. There's so
Yeah.
many, there's people that are like, all right, let's buy a really big plot of land and break it up, and there's that. We're finding, like, I'm just finding so many early childhood educators now that have been doing this for so long. And now what's going on in the world is giving us the opportunity to really come together and just create anew. Like, how sweet is that we get to, come out of that system and say, this isn't working. And now we're going for it. And this is what we're going to have. This is the new earth. It's so important, to just recognize the new earth is actually here. Like, I know that everything looks crazy and everything is flipped upside down. And at the same time, though, when you're in that frequency, when you're in that knowing and that listening, like, we're really actually here. The new earth is really here. Like, when you watch a child, they're not standing there going like, and yeah, sure, there's an innocence there, but they have the capacity to see that beauty. They have that capacity to see the unity within everything, that web that's connecting everything. So, and they're not in polarity, they're not polarized. And yeah, I think it's so important right now just to continue to be that protector for our children and to not allow ourselves to become polarized. Yeah.
So what a beautiful point. And from a more broad reaching perspective, like you said, the amount of division of everything that's happening, if you really, really want to get to the depths of it, the heart of it, from what I can tell, and again, if maybe not everybody agrees with this, but the source of duality that we are witnessing as a reflection in the world around us is within us. It's literally this projection of dualistic perception that hasn't quite been integrated into a more holistic way. And so that's why we keep getting looped or stuck. But a bunch of us are catching it. We're like, oh yeah, that's the limited part of me that never really was mine to begin with. And we're taking responsibility, like, okay, we're gonna develop ourselves. We're gonna break out of this limited perspective of everything. And like you said, this new earth, this new potential, it's already here. But when you have so many human beings that are, because I mean, let's look at it right now. Most people, they're in denial. Like a lot of people who are going along with the quote unquote narrative that's happening. I love a lot of these people. I know them, but a lot of what's happening is they just can't believe that their governments don't want the best for them, or like, they haven't come to that, because that means re-examining everything they think about who they are and what this world means. And
it's something where, and this is what I've noticed, is that's so accepting that narrative, right? That's actually a really wonderful marker for people to see. Not that anyone is better, anyone is right? It's just a wonderful marker to say that's where they're at, right? Yeah. That's where they're at. And they're not, there's like a hiding that's happening. Like, it's okay. And that's where they're at, because if they actually were perhaps to explore the possibilities and see that narrative is actually, they're being duped, that might interrupt their nervous system and shake them so hard that they'll have a nervous breakdown and lose themselves. Right? So we really need to be gentle. Like, we really need to just allow people to be where they're at, because if we're not doing that, we can really, like, they might lose it, right? They might lose it. So it's a slow process. It's slowly happening, so that, because you can't just, it's the same thing with a child. You can't just all of a sudden, all right, that child is 3 and now they're doing this and they're doing that and they're becoming an adult and we're giving them adult responsibilities. we need to be with the person with where they're at.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a really wonderful, for me, learning opportunity, just with people who I love and who are in that narrative, but also, right, taking care of me and taking care of my children, and knowing, okay, I don't want to be in entrainment. I don't want to have this entrainment with this energy, right? So really looking at, okay, I'm starting this pod and I'm going to really be particular with who I let in. Because if I let in a family that is in that vibration of fear, of like, concern and wearing the mask, well, then guess what? My children are going to be in training with that energy every time they're at drop off, every time that they're at pickup. And I don't want that for my children. So, yeah.
It's so beautiful. My gosh.
Yeah. Yay.
Oh, okay. Before we close out here, let's touch on something else. Most of us, because we weren't exposed to the type of childcare that you and others are facilitating, many people have never really grown out of their inner child has been oppressed or suppressed, been stuck within them.
Yeah.
And part of the cleansing process is allowing that inner child to have its emotional meltdown, to have, if you can let yourself go through that and feel it and let it work itself through, that's something that, really needs to be encouraged amongst adults, because, a lot of adults are really stuck in a very narrow bandwidth of perception, of feelings, of emotional reactivity and being triggered by everybody and everything. And we got to realize that a lot of that limited thought, feeling, behavior, and action is the result of not having had the opportunity to expand beyond those initial feelings and outbursts as they emerge.
Yeah.
So absolutely. Doing that, allowing ourselves to have that is really important.
Crucial. I mean, and feeling safe to do that. Yeah. And it's because that was actually I was a Buddhist nun for a while in Thailand, and I would sit there and it would always be about, if something comes up, just let it go. And it was very much about this area, right? And about the breath, but about this area. And then, but what I noticed was that there was a spiritual bypassing, an emotional bypassing that was going on. And I came back to the States and it was like, oh my God, like I'm actually not doing the work. Like I am not doing the work. And so then the work ended up being, sitting by myself, feeling the emotions. And sometimes I would have some really nasty emotions come up, and it would just come up. I didn't need a reason for why these feelings came up. Just sitting with these emotions and loving myself through it and just allowing them to be released, because that's what's happening. You're just clearing the cellular density. And that really then is when there's that integration with your inner child and that inner sage within you. And, there's times, and it comes in waves, right? Where sometimes we need to check ourselves. Maybe the little girl is wanting to really sit in the driver's seat, and when that happens, there's that, it doesn't, when you're in that moment where you feel like like you're kind of going back and forth, and there's this erratic energy, and you're not clear on making a decision, and you're just kind of like wobbling back and forth, that's showing that there's not alignment there. And what's happening is that little child is trying to be in the driver's seat, right? And so we have to very consciously and lovingly say, like, I got you. I'm sorry, you can't be in the driver's seat. like, you're going to be here with me and we can play and we can dance and we can be creative. But when it comes to making these decisions, you can't be in the driver's seat. And yeah, I think what's happening right now and what we're seeing is a lot of people are putting that little child, that inner child in the driver's seat, and they're making decisions based off of coming from fear, right? They're making their decisions based off of fear or based out of wanting to just get it over with and feel comfortable. And that's when we really need to check ourselves. So, yeah.
Oh. All right, here's somebody asked a good question. This is a hard question to answer, so don't feel like don't feel any or feel whatever, feel everything. Okay, so somebody wrote, it seems to me a lot of people in the spiritual community are choosing not to have kids. Why is that?
Oh yeah. There are a lot that are not having children, and there are a lot that are, and it's really about the person. It's an initiation. So something we need to realize is that all of this is consciousness, right? We are consciousness. Everything is consciousness. And everything that we are doing, the work that we are doing and the choices that we're doing, what's coming to us, we are creating that, right? So right now, people watching this YouTube station, like watching Seth and I, they have created us, right? They've created us for a reason. And so when you're choosing to have children, that is your creation. And that is an initiation that you're now taking. And some people, they have been through that journey. They've been through that journey of whether it be the inner work of the child, they've been through, or maybe they want to deepen that journey, whatever it is. So that they're choosing to go to that initiation, because having a child, having a family is an initiation. So, I mean, that's what I would say. I don't know if you want to add any.
Great answer. Oh, if I throw in my thing, it's going to go on forever. But ultimately, it's that whole thing. There's no right, wrong, good or bad. Like some are, some aren't. Absolutely. From a greater perspective, you could say that a lot of people are starting to realize that our way of life in quote unquote the civilized Western world is not in harmony with nature, with universal law, with divinity, with God, with whatever name you want to give to that, which is everything. And a lot of people are starting to feel like, wow, I would much rather cultivate a greater connection to what this invisible field that's causing me to exist truly is, before we keep having children and bringing them to the world. We haven't dealt with our own inner children enough to start bringing other children into the world. And so it feels to me like there's a lot of people who are realizing this whole tradition of just having big families and being consumers of all the products of society, making us products of society. People were like, we're not doing that anymore. We're choosing to do something else. And because let's face it, I mean, human beings have been functioning more like pathogenic bacteria on this planet. Yes. And we have all been a part of it. We've all contributed to that.
Yeah.
So what do, right? Like, well, that's why everything's crumbling and coming apart at the same time. And, everything that's happening, whatever, there's a million things. But the more we zoom out, the more the solutions just start to become self-evident, because they've always been there. We have just been too caught up in who we think we are, according to the conditioning of the world, to realize what we actually are. So it's like you said, it's inverse. Everybody's focused on who they are, almost completely ignoring what we are. So the more we allow what we are to come to the forefront of our awareness, the more our intuition, the more our higher virtuistic expressions of, higher elevated states of being, of love, compassion, empathy, of goodwill, of loving kindness, all these different things, the more we start to implement that and show others by example, because we're doing it, and the more that entrains people to start coming out of these stuck closed loop conditioned systems that many aren't even aware that they're
Yeah,
projecting, and getting
absolutely.
us into alignment.
It's like breaking out of that paradigm. And I'm curious, Seth, because you're a father, you know, and with that question, with that what that person asked of how a lot of people in the spiritual community aren't having children, do you see that there's that shift happening right now where, you can call it, I don't know, like, just as we need to use these words just
Yeah,
to,
of
right?
course, of
So
course.
like there's that third dimensional parenting, right? And then there's actually, no, wait, there's a fifth dimensional heart-centered parenting, right? Are you seeing that more? And yeah, are you witnessing that more in that shift? And I'm curious about that because I'm not a parent, and yeah.
Yeah, I'm seeing both. I'm seeing, again, a lot of, I, I'm different in the sense that I really, really allow myself to take responsibility to the best of my abilities for how I perceive everything. So if I see somebody or somebody doing something, instead of getting into this victim or savior consciousness, I instead and say, oh, it's their fault for this, or I'm like, okay, I'm witnessing calamity or chaos or destruction or something. Why? What is that? And instead of the why being an inquiry in alignment with a conditioned perspective, I allow my own awareness to expand to the degree that I begin to feel the unintegrated aspects of my own soul, you could say, that are attempting to integrate into my human awareness. And
Right.
so the more I allow that stuff to happen, the less hung up I get on, particular observations of things in the world. But, to bring it down to earth a little bit, we're seeing both. We're seeing people that are so freaking out by what's happening that they're just stuck. They're like really stuck. And then we're seeing people who are like, thank God, this is an opportunity of all opportunities. And that really is a skill, right? It's something that to have that kind of attitude in the face of chaos is something that each and every one of us have the ability to cultivate and develop within ourselves. And it all goes back to what you're doing with these children. So that's how I would answer it.
Awesome.
All right, let me check out here. I can't wait to share this love. So many years in education with these rules and pressure. Yeah, people are just saying all kinds of great things
Yay.
here. Hopefully,
Yeah, I'm
yes, this
so
video will
like,
be up. Somebody's asked. So we're gonna get Halimah's information and stuff to put into this where you can find her and find out more, because why we're having these conversations is because we are shifting out of all these limited ways of thinking, feeling, and being, and we are creating a greater, more expansive possibility of how we can live as individuals and together as a species. And these conversations and things that we're doing here are all instrumental, and we want it to be shared and networked and sent out there, because the solutions are actually way more prevalent than the problems are, but
totally.
yet we're stuck in such a state of collective limitation that it's hard to see it, it's hard to feel it, it's hard to know it, but that's okay.
And we're
We
finding our tribe, that's what's happening. Like we're all coming together and we're finding our tribe and we're all working together. Like I'm having teachers come to me who are doing really similar things. And it's like, okay, and I'm also having like grandparents coming to me and saying, I want to have a land where we have children on this land and you're doing this. So there's also integration happening where it's not just, a preschool on land. It's like, okay, now the children are actually coexisting with, the people who are with our elders. It's like,
Oh, yeah.
it's really beautiful. It's incredible. Yeah.
All right. So thank you so
Thank
much
you
for your
so much,
time.
Seth. Yeah, this is so much fun.
And we'll do more. We'll do it again.
Yeah,
As stuff comes up, we want to encourage change. Like, we could easily not be doing this.
right, right.
So with that said, I want to tell people some housekeeping stuff. Laura Eisenhower's actual personal YouTube channel got given back to her. So that's there
Yay.
now. It's up. And Saturday night, tomorrow night, we're having a huge mass meditation with others who are facilitating it and doing it. I'm going to be there. I don't remember the names of everybody. I'll have to look them up, but a bunch of people are going to be doing that on Laura's main channel. We'll probably post it on this one after too. So tune into that if you guys are available. I know tomorrow night, it's going to be about 10:20 Eastern Standard Time. So whatever time zone you're in, keep that in mind, but we're going to be doing that tomorrow night. And then this channel that we have here is a community effort that Laura has so graciously offered to us, to those who are truly gonna bring a message of embodying truth, of love, not pointing fingers, not like we are here to build conscious community and get over the things that keep us in division and separation and strengthen the bonds to the miracle of life that is allowing us to exist, and then helping keep each other in check and supporting one another. Just like Halimah's doing with the children, we too are doing that together as adults.
Mm.
And the more we do that, the more we will become consciously entrained with the miracle of life that is pulsing through all the systems of our body, through this beautiful planet, through the solar system, the galaxy, the universe, all of it. When we, as these beings we are, become aligned with that which we truly are, you just know what to do. You just know how to behave. You know when you're out of alignment, you know when you're not. And it's called growing up, but retaining your innocence, anyhow. So tomorrow night, tune in, you guys. Make sure to share this video and subscribe, get others if you resonate with this. If you don't, no problem. But yeah, sign up, tell everybody about it. And Halimah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Seth, for having me. And thank you, everybody, for just being here now and showing up. And you guys are amazing. Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right.
Aloha.
Aloha.